Absolutely. So welcome everybody. Good afternoon to those of you that are calling in from the United States, and good evening to those of you that are dialing in from the United Kingdom. Welcome to this water cooler chat hosted by the International Town and Gown Association. My name's Cooper Healy and I'm an executive board member at ITGA and also the chair of the UK TGA. And just shortly, I'm going to hand over to our colleague Dave Wilson from West Midlands Police, who's going to give what I consider to be a seminal presentation on Chinese student vulnerabilities and Chinese student exploitation. But just a little bit of background from me. I was first introduced to Dave in the summer of 2022 through the Police Association Higher Education Liaison Officer Network, or the PHALO network for short, which is an association of officers that work on campus or work with university communities and neighbourhoods. And Dave delivered his breathtaking presentation at that session. It spoke to me in volumes in terms of some of the things that Dave was highlighting with regards to Chinese populations on United Kingdom campus areas, and I immediately chased him down to present for us at the UK TGA, which he did in December, and that actually was one of our record attendance sessions at UK TGA. We got the highest number of attendees that we've ever had, so it really proved that this was a UK issue that colleagues in university town and gown situations were acutely aware of and wanted to do something with. Beth and Susan from ITGA attended that UK TGA session and also saw how important the subject matter was, and felt that it was something that we could share, was translatable across the pond, that International Town and Gown Association members would be really interested in. So I'm really pleased to see so many of you on the call today, and I know that you're going to find this session of interest. Dave's been doing a lot of work on this, and he's created a survey that no doubt he's going to talk to you about at the end of the session. We will utilise the normal Zoom room rules. So if you're not already muted, please mute yourselves. Please feel free to utilise the chat facility. Drop any questions that you have throughout the session into the chat. We'll leave some time at the end for a bit of discussion, some discussion points, some Q&A. I will pick up on questions that you've dropped in the chat at that point. And also, if you want to, when we give you the nod, use your electronic hand, raise your electronic hand if you want to contribute verbally to the discussion after Dave's finished his main presentation. We're really interested in getting some discussion flowing around this, so be prepared for that. I'll come to you at the end of the session when Dave's completed his presentation. So without further ado, I will hand over to my esteemed colleague Dave, who works with West Midlands Police, and Dave will take you through his presentation. Thanks, Dave.
Thank you very much, Cooper, for that wonderful introduction. I just hope that I can live up to it. And also thank you to the Town and Gown Society and for Beth for inviting me to present today. You know, to be invited to present to an international audience is a real privilege. So thank you very much for that. I do work for West Midlands Police. I'm based there, but I'm part of the National Modern Slavery and Organised Immigration Crime Team based in Devon and Cornwall, which is a national team, and we have a regional coordinator in every region. And I'm the coordinator for the West Midlands. I'm not a police officer anymore. I retired in 2017 as Detective Inspector for Force Intelligence. So intelligence has always been my thing. But I came back in this role because it was just too good to turn down, and I still have a real passion for it. So hopefully you will find it interesting. Let me just try and share my screen, and then let me get it onto. We go. Just give me a second. Right, can everybody see that now?
Yes.
I know everyone's on mute. Brilliant. Okay, somebody just give me a yes. Right, okay. So where are we? Yeah, so this is around Chinese student vulnerabilities, and there's some topics we probably need to talk about that surround that to give it some context. No, I know that a couple of people have come back to me after the presentation, really thinking that it's a pandemic and every single Chinese student is at risk, and it really is. I just want to say that while Chinese students, because of what we're going to talk about, do have a raised risk, it doesn't mean every student is being exploited, or that we should panic about it in any way, or see students in anything, see Chinese students as a problem. We really need to see them in terms of their vulnerabilities and support them. So that's kind of my message with that. Okay. So what we'll talk about today is organised crime within Chinese society, because the exploitation of the students is really not just by the odd person here and there. It is by serious organised crime groups. So their context within Chinese society is really important. Who those organised crime groups are, because they're very different from most European organised crime groups, and it really is a huge benefit to understand that, how those groups operate, what the student vulnerabilities are, and also where the People's Republic of China fits into this, because there's very little that goes on with any Chinese population that the People's Republic of China does not have a hand in. So it is worth knowing and understanding what their role in it is. So that's sort of the contents, if you like, and I will get into the presentation proper. So the first thing is cultural and language barriers with Chinese students. They do say that with Chinese organised crime, the first level of encryption for them is the culture and the language. It's not an easily learnable language for most Westerners. All the characters are different. It's not like learning French or Spanish. Very, very different. And their culture is wholly different to ours, probably the most different culture you could find from Western culture. That in itself provides barriers to engagement with students and to tackling serious organised crime. Organised crime within Chinese society is really, really different to how I would describe it in Western society. So in Western society, there was an interesting study done by Dr. John Denley in the UK, who looked at UK organised crime groups made up of mainly of UK nominals. And what he found was that regardless of police intervention, they would cease to exist within about 5 to 7 years of forming. And that could be for various factors. It may be that because they fell out and went their separate ways. It may be because they got targeted by other crime groups. It may be because they just made enough money and decided that they wanted to go legitimate, or it may be because they got targeted by police. But some of these Chinese organized crime groups have been going hundreds and hundreds of years, so they're totally different to UK organized crime groups, most Western organized crime groups. And I would describe their place in society perhaps a little bit the same as either the Sicilian mafia, who've been going a long, long time. So it's interesting with the Sicilian mafia. There are particular families and particular groups, and you need to know who you're dealing with to get the most out of your intelligence. And it's very much the same with Chinese society. But you could also compare them very, very closely in sort of a cultural context to the Freemasons. So in every town, in every city, in most Western countries, you'll find a Freemasons lodge, which is a secret society. It's embedded in our culture, and Chinese secret societies and organized crime groups are embedded in Chinese culture exactly the same way. The Chinese organized crime groups have a very narrow ethnic footprint. Most Western organized crime groups will have a footprint across most ethnicities. They're not particularly worried about who they affect. They will rob or take money from, exploit anybody. Whereas Chinese organized crime groups aren't really like that. They tend to have a very narrow ethnic footprint, and they only really affect Chinese citizens or other nationalities where Chinese organized crime groups are present, and particularly Vietnam and Malaysia. The Chinese tribes have historically been very strong in Vietnam and Malaysia, so they may influence Vietnamese and Malaysian students and populace as well, but very narrow within that Southeast Asian footprint. They're extremely high sophistication. Crime groups vary drastically in how sophisticated they are. Some are very crude and some are very sophisticated. But in 35 years of law enforcement, I've never seen any crime groups that are as sophisticated as the Chinese organized crime groups. They are far more akin to international business institutions than they are to crime groups in their organization. They have their own recruitment, they have their own lawyers, they have their own accountants. They will try and penetrate law enforcement and government institutions and have people in high places there. They're extremely sophisticated in everything that they do. They've also shown the ability to very, very quickly shift their tactics when security adapts to what they're doing. They are truly transnational. Everywhere you find a Chinese population of any kind of volume, you will find Chinese organized crime groups. That's really well documented. And what they do in one country, they will replicate in a very similar way in the other. And while they are very, very highly sophisticated, one of their weaknesses, you might say, is they're quite predictable. If they're doing something a certain way in the UK, then they're likely doing it the same way in Germany, in Holland, or in America as well. And polycriminal, absolutely. I mean, when I started policing back in the late 80s, all those years ago, criminals tended to do a thing. They stole cars, or they robbed banks, or they conned people out of money. But what we're seeing now is that the exploitation, whether it's sexual exploitation or financial exploitation of students, is really just one facet of a much, much wider criminal business model. And I'll go into that at a later stage. Okay, so who are these groups? You can read an awful lot about it. Some of them are sensationalized and not really very accurate, but there's a lot of books out there that are very good. There's 3 of them up there that are probably worth a read. The first one, Secret Societies in China, is probably affordable, but gives you a really good background. There's triads and black societies. So triads and black societies are in effect the same thing, but triads go back a long, long way. So if we ask how far back triads go in Chinese history and culture, they probably go back to the 1200s, where the Chinese were conquered by the Mongols, the Yuan dynasty, and a society formed called the White Lotus Society across all 13 provinces of China, which is a vast area. Now that society may have been formed almost 1,000 years prior to that, but the first time we really see strong evidence of it is under the Mongol occupation. And in the 1300s, as the Mongol dynasty started to weaken, the White Lotus Society organized a rebellion through the whole of China, incredibly well-connected society, and they overthrew the Yuan dynasty. And the leader of the White Lotus Society was a Buddhist monk called Hung Wu, and he became the first Ming Emperor of China. So that's how powerful the societies were. Later in 1644, when the Ming dynasty was overthrown, the White Lotus Society and specifically the triads became extremely important again. They didn't really operate in an anti-government context during the Ming dynasty. They were very pro-Ming dynasty and pro-China. But when China got conquered by the Manchurians and the Qing dynasty, again they rose, and there was rebellion after rebellion, all by the triads and the White Lotus Society until 1911, when they eventually overthrew the Qing dynasty, and they tried to implement the Ming dynasty again, but it was long gone, and it wasn't doable. So what you ended up with is a civil war between the Chinese Republicans and the Chinese Communists, obviously who are now in power. But the triads, for the most part, aligned themselves with the Chinese Republicans who lost the war, and those are now the people who occupy Taiwan. I didn't know this before I started researching this, but the Chinese People's Republic of China actually lost the war and moved to Taiwan. That's what they still occupy, and the triads were linked closely to them. Since then, you've seen a shift away from that, and the triads more and more aligned, on and off, very much more on now to the actual Communist People's Republic of China, which is currently in power in China. Who are the groups? Woxingwo, 14K, Sun Lian, the Big Circle Boys, and a group called Fuking Bang are very much the groups that you will see in the UK. Woxingwo and 14K certainly, but what we're seeing in the UK now is a very, very dominant takeover, if you like, by the Fujianese OCGs, of which Fuking Bang is the lead one. I know in America they're known as the Fuqing, and they very well may be the same group, and that is one of the intelligence requirements we're looking at when we liaise with United States law enforcement, to understand if they're the same groups or not, or what they are. But understanding which groups we've got is really, really important to the international link up, Because what we tend to do is we lump 4 or 5 people together who are committing crime, and we give it a name and call it an organized crime group. And that is really inaccurate. For the vast majority of Chinese organized crime is committed by these 5 and other groups. So understanding whether you've got Woxinghua or 14K is really important to then linking your intelligence up internationally, because that group will operate internationally. If you know who they are, then you can get that link up far easier. If we go back a long way, the triads were really an altruistic, patriotic society who tried to overthrow foreign dynasties in China, as we've said, but not really an organized crime group. So they've come a long way down a very bad path in a short time, and they were described in 1960 by the Royal Hong Kong Police Commissioner of Great Britain as ordinary hoodlums masquerading as a long dead giant. They were no longer altruistic. By 1960, they were a totally criminal group, and they've continued to be that. So it's in every town, in every city in China, and in every country with a Chinese population, you will find Chinese organized crime groups. It is absolutely embedded in their society. And how much in Hong Kong in 1960? It was estimated that 1 in every 6 residents, so 500,000 out of 6 million, 500,000 out of 3 million Chinese people, were actually members of triad lodges. It's not supposed to be that high now, but it just shows you how much it is absolutely embedded in their society. The estimate for now is about 200,000 rather than 500,000, but it's still a massive proportion of the Chinese community. Not to say that every single one is an active member, but they all have been members at some point or retain membership. Secret societies and triads and black society groups are very much all seen together within Chinese culture. If you talk about black societies, that's probably a term that is more familiar now to Chinese students and Chinese populace than the term triads. People's Republic of China is very much now linked to triads and black societies, and what we've seen very much is the repression of Chinese diaspora worldwide by the Chinese government, and it's part of what's called the United Front, which I will go into. But what we've also seen is, through some investigative journalism, a really interesting and quite alarming action by the People's Republic of China about unofficial police stations in Western countries. And I'll just flip to a slide that demonstrates that. So we can see there's a lot in Europe here. We've got them in South America, we've got them in New York and in Canada. And what these police stations are, and it's online if you want to read this. I'm not telling you anything that's official sensitive information. Is there are certain people that have left China that the Chinese government want back? It could be for a number of reasons. It could be that they feel they are criminals and they need to come back. And face justice. It may be they are critical of the Chinese government, and the Chinese government doesn't want them abroad being critical of the Chinese government and wants them back home where they can contain them. It may be they've been students who've been sent out to obtain certain technologies and Western secrets, albeit not illegally. And the problem with that is that a lot of people the Chinese send out to what you would describe as lawful industrial espionage actually quite like it in the West and don't want to come back. So you've got a mix of people who now live outside China, who the Chinese government wants back. So what they've done is they arrange for these people to be taken to these unofficial police stations. And there they sit in front of a screen with, on the other end, someone in power in the Chinese government official. And they will say to them, often with their family in the background, unless you come home, your family will not be able to have their kids go to school. Your parents will not be able to receive heating in their house. They will not be able to shop at supermarkets. They will not be able to receive health treatment or a wide variety of sanctions until you come back home. Totally against international law. What it doesn't say in this report is who in these countries amongst the Chinese population is doing it. But there really is only one group who has got the infrastructure and the influence in these countries to do that for the Chinese government, and that is the serious organized crime, the organized crime groups that we've discussed. Further around the Chinese government, where we've seen the repression of the Hong Kong pro-democracy protesters on a number of occasions, they haven't been beaten up and repressed by the police. The police have very much taken a back seat. But all the press will tell you, and there's some headlines there that have been picked off the internet. It's actually the triads and the black societies that attack these people, and beat them up and try and dissuade them physically from protesting pro-democracy protests. And they are absolutely paid for and directed by the Chinese government. So while you wouldn't say the Chinese government has assimilated with these groups, they are certainly clearly and really well evidenced that they are in alliance. Okay, polycriminality. So what do I mean by polycriminality? All sorts of different crime themes, but run by the same crime group. So sexual exploitation. I know there is an awful lot of Chinese brothels in the UK. We know that one group, one cell of one group, was coordinating at least 45 brothels over 14 separate force areas, and that's only one cell. And I also know that I think it's massage parlors they're billed as in the United States, but that is a really big thing in the United States. Been working with some people in law enforcement over there, and also some private business who provide IT for law enforcement. But sex exploitation is absolutely massive, and women are often transported in on genuine tourist visas, but fraudulently obtained for that purpose. And we've also seen students who have been coerced to take part in that and be exploited in that way. Drug import and export. I don't know about the United States, but certainly for the UK, we see a lot of drug import and export by these groups. One group in Birmingham was importing and exporting 250 million pounds of cannabis per year, which is big money, but they weren't doing it in big shipments. What they're doing is they are coercing people in the Chinese community, especially Chinese students who are away from their support network in a foreign country and easily coerced, to take these parcels. And a lot of them come through in 2, 3, 4 kilo parcels, maybe twice a week, and they will pay the students a nominal fee. They will be imported. As soon as the parcel arrives, they'll have tracked it online, they'll phone the student, and then they'll come and pick it up and pay the student £10, $10 or something like that. But that is really endemic within the student population in the UK. And it's really interesting because every university I speak to is telling me exactly the same thing about this. Counterfeit tobacco and other goods. So counterfeit tobacco and cigarettes are absolutely massive. Students are receiving them at their addresses as well. Not surprising when you consider that of the world volume of counterfeit goods, 95% of them originate from Hong Kong or China. Extortion rackets are often local businesses will be extorted. You either pay us the money, or we'll smash up your restaurant, or we'll burn it down. Loan sharking is massive. One of the ways that they launder the money that they get is they loan it out to students or other people in cash, and then charge extortionate rates. And of course, once you are in the grip of a loan shark, in order to pay that off, you will literally do anything. And so de facto, you become part of the criminal population by coercion. Money laundering, of course, comes along with all these other crime themes. And academic fraud, what we've seen both historically and currently, is we've seen advertisements for specifically Chinese students to have their essays and dissertations written by a private company for a fee. And that is quite alarming. So historically and currently, we're seeing that now in Birmingham, where these services have been advertised, and we're working with Birmingham University to try and dig a little bit deeper into this. But it is a really concerning facet of that polycriminality. How does this affect students? Because at the end of the day, that's why we're here. We're here to safeguard our students and prevent them from being exploited. Talked about sex exploitation. This is endemic. We've seen some really efficient charities. One of the Black Country Women's Aid, who are led by a really well qualified doctor in sexual exploitation. It says Black Country. Black Country, for those people who don't know, he's part of the Birmingham area, but they do actually cover the whole Birmingham area. And they say, when we go to brothels, and we go to Chinese brothels to speak to the sex workers, we often see Chinese students there who will always say, "I'm just visiting a friend. I don't have any friends or prostitutes. I don't say they're bad people, but they're not the circles that I mix in." If you are mixing in those circles and you're a young female, you are highly likely to be coerced into being involved in that world. So some of the reasons people get involved in it. My family is in debt in China. That's a common one. People can very easily get into debt for a number of reasons, including paying for students' university fees, which are absolutely extortionate to come from China, often £30,000 a year. On the right is not something I picked off the internet. That is a note written by a Chinese sex worker who was kept captive. She was sent out with £20 to get some food, and she managed to write out 3 of those envelopes. You can see there's just some writing on envelope there. 2 she posted to her neighbours either side, and 1 she gave to the cashier at the supermarket where she bought food. And that's one we were able to rescue. We talked about counterfeit tobacco and counterfeit cigarettes. On the left, you see 2 pictures. Those are the sort of brands we're talking about. Those are photographs from a download of an organised crime member's phone. And they just show the amount of cigarettes that are coming in and the types of cigarettes that are coming in. On the right, you've got 3 notices, I guess. But what they do is they really give you an idea of just how sophisticated these groups are. So the 2 in the middle are say no smoking, and the one on the left is close the door. We see these all over Chinese student accommodation in Chinatown in Birmingham. So, not being a Chinese speaker, what I would suggest they would say in Chinese writing is, if you want to quit smoking, then please click on this QR code or this number, or if you want to buy signs similar to these, then please click on this QR code or call this number or this email address. They don't say that. In Chinese, what they say is, if you want to buy counterfeit Chinese goods or cigarettes, click on this QR code or this number. So even by using no smoking and shut the door signs posted all over the place, because they know we don't speak Chinese, they are involving people in their criminal enterprise. And if you click on that QR code, I think it's defunct now, but you used to take you to a Chinese organized crime group operating in Austria, which was a staging point for goods being transported from the Far East. Okay, money laundering is again is endemic because we've got to get rid of that money somehow. There was a post office in Birmingham where the post office identified multiple accounts. In fact, there were 38 accounts, all laundering thousands of pounds every day, all in Chinese names. The average was £2,000 per day. That doesn't mean somebody went in every day with £2,000. They could not go in for 2 weeks and come in with £30,000, and that was often the way it was. Of those accounts, 80% or 32 of those 32 of those 38 accounts were students. And what the investigation showed was some students were complicit, had been coerced into it. Some students had had their details stolen from a WeChat group. WeChat groups, WeChat is controlled by the People's Republic of China. But also what you find, I'll talk about this in a minute, is that Chinese students join WeChat groups as a support network. But often the people offering that support network are the people themselves that are exploiting them, and that's what's made them particularly vulnerable in the university context. And some of the students had also sold accounts. They were going back to China, they graduated, and they were coerced into just selling their accounts for a small fee, handing over the account details to the organised crime group who used it to launder money. Talked about academic fraud. We have seen a lot of organised crime money laundering has been used to pay the university fees of certain Chinese students. As we've said, some of them will not write their own essays, they will not write their own dissertations, and they will employ private companies to do it. Some did not return to China and will carry on running businesses here in the UK, facilitating the same thing. We've seen that at Birmingham as well. But let me just go back to that book. If you look at that book on the right hand side, Chinese Industrial Espionage, it's a really good book. It's a bit hard going to read, but it lays out the official Chinese government strategy for obtaining Western technology. And so you see all the key subjects in that book, and all the key technology that they are looking to obtain is where we see Chinese students booking on courses in the UK. But very interesting book. In the UK, we've probably got about 150,000 Chinese students. Having that's what it says, the official figures. But having talked to people like to Cooper and several others, I think that might even be a low store. The problem we've got is we've got a historic mistrust of the police. You don't trust the police in China. There's a high level of corruption, which is called red corruption, and so community engagement is really key for us. the message very strongly that I've had from Birmingham community student communities, they don't trust the police. When we've reported things, they reported things to us, we've been ineffective, and therefore sometimes they will turn to the OCG, the organised crime groups, to solve problems for them rather than come to the police. And again, that means they owe money and it makes them vulnerable to being coerced into criminal activity. And once we get to that stage, that where they don't trust the police, they'll go to the organised crime groups. I think we're in real trouble. They're vulnerable on WeChat. It's controlled and monitored by the People's Republic of China. It's banned in the US, I understand, and in India due to security concerns. And there's coercion from those organised crime groups to be involved in those crime types that we discussed: sex exploitation, laundering money for organised crime groups, and receiving drugs and other goods at their address. And as we said, to take money from loan sharks. These are some posters that we had done with a group called Stop the Traffic, who are an international charity, and they deal with all sorts of exploitation, not just trafficking. One is in Cantonese, one is in Mandarin, and we've sent these out to universities, and they're being put up throughout the UK, hopefully. So anyone who wants those is welcome to them. Right, so we find a lot of hidden issues within university students. They don't report it for the reasons we've discussed. So we haven't got a true picture of the vulnerability at the moment. The offences they've been subject to robbery. One down at Exeter was held for 3 days in his student accommodation by organised crime group members who attempted to extort money from his parents in China through him. There was one in Birmingham where a Chinese lad came over and quite naively tried to pay his university fees at reception with £30,000. He was told to take it home, put it in the bank, and pay it by transfer. Within 12 hours of him arriving home, 4 Chinese organised crime group members stole his money, kidnapped him, took him into Birmingham, into Chinatown, and again tried to extort £100,000 from his parents. Thankfully, they failed. We talked about kidnapping and extortion. Coercion to accept packages. We've spoken to Chinese students who have done that. We've treated those people as victims, and they have said to us that there is an understanding within the Chinese community that if these groups ask you to do it, you have to do it because they're very, very dangerous people. And they are aware that other students are doing it, but they will never find out who. Talked about loan sharks. If people maybe are struggling with their studies or struggling with their finances and they want to take advantage of that academic fraud or just need some money, they become victims of loan sharks. As we've said, that straight away makes you very coercible into criminal activity. A lot of student passports used to enable criminality. So what we found is that people will almost without question come into the country on genuine passports, but then sometimes those passports are used to enable criminality, such as renting premises for cannabis grows, renting premises for sexual exploitation as brothels, or opening bank accounts in their name. So to sort of get a better hand on this and a better understanding, I am conducting a study sponsored by the Home Office through the National Modern Slavery and Organised Immigration Crime Team and based at the University of Buckingham, where I'm doing my PhD on this, to try and ascertain the true or a greatly improved picture of student vulnerability. And it asks a lot of questions. It is deliberately anonymous. There is a space at the end that says, if you want us to contact you, please leave your details, but otherwise it is entirely anonymous. It doesn't ask too many questions about you, so you couldn't therefore piece together who it was by the different, like, mosaic disclosure. But it asks about how safe people feel on campus or why they feel unsafe or safe or unsafe. It does not ask if anyone's committed criminal offences. We wouldn't do that. But it does ask if anyone's tried to coerce them to commit any of the offences we've talked about. And if so, did they feel, or if anyone asked them, would they feel obliged to do it? It's asked them what they feel the universities could do to improve the security and improve their feeling of security, and a number of other questions. It's been through ethics at Buckingham. We've paid certainly a lot of money to have it translated into Cantonese and Chinese and have it checked and double checked. So there's 2 versions. The students can select which one they want. There's either an English version supplemented by Cantonese or an English version supplemented by Mandarin. And we would like to get that out to as many universities as possible to really give us as complete a picture as we can of the vulnerability of Chinese students. And what we will do is, when it's put together, any university that's participating will make sure you get the results of the study. Okay, so what can we do for Chinese students to help them? Make sure we engage with them. They won't necessarily engage with you, and unless they have a reason to engage with them. Identify those people willing to talk, and offer that hand of friendship, and those people who are willing to talk. Make sure we get the most out of them. If we can understand what's the influence of Chinese organised crime groups, what's the influence in their Chinese community? I mean, at Buckingham, I think there's probably only about 30 or 40 Chinese students. It's really, really very little. But at others like Manchester and Exeter, that influence is clearly a lot greater. So what is the fear of these organised crime groups? And who are they? More to the point, we've talked about Woxing Wo, we've talked about Fuqing Bang. And Fuqing Bang, we came to identify that purely through talking to Chinese students at Birmingham University, who told us exactly who it was, and then we were then able to go away and corroborate that through other Chinese sources. So who are they? Stay aware, know what to look for, know what the signs are, and just get students to speak to university liaison officers, and for university staff to speak to university liaison officers as well. Those are our link into law enforcement, and they're generally experienced officers who know what they're talking about. I have probably gone on for long enough. Those are my details on the screen, my email address and my mobile. If anyone either wants the presentation, or if you haven't got time or can't think of a question to ask today, but later think of anything, then please let me know, and I will make sure I answer your question in good time. I'll stop sharing my screen.
Thank you, Dave. That was that's the third time I've seen that presentation now, and each time I hear it, I'm really sort of blown away by the scale of what we're talking about, and just how global the operation is, really, with far-reaching fingers. And I think that's why I thought it was appropriate for ITGA to hear as well. Want to put it out to the audience, if anyone has any questions, comments or queries, please raise your electronic hand and jump in. But while you're thinking of something intelligent to say, I just wanted to ask Dave, I know that your main study is around Chinese students, obviously, in Chinese student vulnerability, but are there any other nationalities on a global scale, in terms of countries that often send students abroad to study, that we should also perhaps be aware of or thinking of in your experience?
Yeah, I would say obviously China is number one, but some of the work around this has really brought the whole foreign student vulnerability issue to the fore for the British Home Office. And with a bit of digging, what they're seeing is that there's a lot of students, foreign students in the UK, the many that are not to the level we've seen with the Chinese, but potentially Albanian students or Romanian students or Vietnamese students, who are exploited, and almost exclusively they're exploited by organised crime groups of their own nationality.
Right.
And that's really the key theme.
Okay, thank you. I can see that Courtney's got a hand up. Courtney.
Hi, Courtney.
Yes, good morning, Dave. Thank you so much for taking the time to educate all of us. I just feel really shocked, and I just was wondering, if, as you've given this presentation to different audiences, UK reactions versus US reactions, and is that the general consensus that you're bringing awareness to an issue or issues that most people don't have previous knowledge of, have some knowledge of? Like, what is your experience with different
So
audiences?
for the most part, what's happened is the minute that, so I did one for the Bahalo conference where I was actually on stage at the conference doing it. And the same for that one as the ones online. Literally, as soon as I finish, people will come over and say, either on the chat or in person, we've got that at our university. And it's not just isolated incidents. Where we've got a decent level of population of Chinese students at university, it's happening. Literally, everybody's saying to me, either emailing me or coming up to me saying, this is happening all the time, but we've had that at our university just the same. And it's a constant theme.
I think
so. It is a little bit shocking. but you know, it's one of those things that I think this is really worth turning the stone over. We've got victims in this, and we really need to do our best for you know, for just genuine people from whatever nationality.
Yeah, I wonder, to Courtney's point, I know Naomi's on the call. Naomi, can you still hear us? As the sausage dog got your attention? I don't know. Certainly Naomi had some comments. She joined us a little earlier and was saying that for Sussex University, that was an issue. Is there any other comment, Naomi, that you can make around that? No, we've got thumbs up.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I'm here. I'm kind of navigating with everyone will know this, with kind of working from home things, navigating with children's tea and listening in as well. So could that just be repeated just for me, just one moment?
Yeah, it was and I'll come to Sue in a second, because I know we were having a chat just before the session started. But is this to Courtney's point about, you know, how widespread this is? Is this an issue for you down in Sussex?
Sorry, yeah, absolutely. You know, for us, I think that we're seeing very different, you know, kind of. I think this last year we've seen a completely different international cohort in terms of their kind of needs, but also the way in which the city is not particularly ready for international students coming either. So yes, absolutely.
Okay, thank you. And Sue?
Hi, Sue.
Sorry. Yeah, thank you so much. That was really, really useful and very interesting. And I wasn't shocked. I was actually kind of feeling like, yeah, absolutely, it's going on. And absolutely, we need to be kind of working together to kind of figure out how we're going to kind of improve things for students. Particularly for us, I think it is those kind of cultural differences, even, you know, from our perspective in terms of well-being, you know, say, for example, as opposite, UK students struggle to talk about their mental health or when they're struggling. And then I think for those Chinese students, it's kind of even more, there's another layer of kind of, you know, I'm seen to fail if I'm kind of asking for help. And, you know, that authority of kind of, like you say, that their police and the OCGs are totally embedded in their kind of government environment. And it's really hard for them, you know, I see how vulnerable they are and how, you know, kind of how can we help? So really, I guess it's, you know, absolutely, I would like to work together, but how can we support, you know, how do we get them to kind of engage and say, you know, what is going on for you and who are those crime groups that, you know, that we're dealing with, so that we can get that intel?
I mean, it can be difficult. I mean, I've done a lot of work at Birmingham University now. And we've spoken to some of the university student leaders, some of the Chinese student leaders, and they are really hard work to get on board. But you know, they will if you work with them, if you really push them, and if you stick with it. I mean, I've had to have 3 or 4 meetings with some of them, and they said, well, you know, you keep coming back, you're not going away. No, I'm not going away. I'm going to be here until this is done. You know, until we've got a proper handle on this and we know what's going on and we can do something about it, I'm going to be here. And when they see that you really mean business, and that you are genuine, often they will come on board. The problem we've got in Birmingham is we haven't dealt with the Chinese community very well, and there's a lack of faith in the police. So it's made it a bit harder for us to get on board. But we'll make it and we'll do it. I want to say, Sue, can you send me your email, Sue? Because I would love to get in touch with Southampton University about this and
Yes,
potentially
I mean,
get the.
To be fair, I know it's going on and we're aware. I'm not sure how kind of higher levels of the university or whether they're kind of prepared to sort of accept that it's going on and kind of be public about it, but it's definitely going on. Yeah, and we've got a huge population of Chinese students particularly.
So if you email me, Sue, if I put my have you got my email?
I've written a note of yours anyway. I will email you, don't worry.
If you email, I'll email you all the documents for the survey,
fantastic,
and then we can just liaise with the.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Ellie's been waiting really patiently with her hand up there.
Yes, thank you. I mean, University of Nottingham. I was just wondering, would you say that primarily Chinese groups target our Chinese students, or are they also vulnerable to other kinds of organized or not so organized crime and like fraud? Because I remember I just have like this memory of a student where they had someone pretend to be an immigration official and enter their accommodation and try and seize their passport. And, you know, like, I'm just kind of wondering what other.
I would say that Chinese students are no more vulnerable to other OCGs than anybody else. They're doesn't mean they're not, but it means that OCGs will target whoever they think is vulnerable. But the Chinese organised crime groups know they're vulnerable, and we've seen that MO with because Chinese people. I mean, I've got a couple of Chinese friends, and they tend to do what the government asks them, and they say, I can't understand it in the UK. You know, the government asks people to do something and they don't do it. And we're like, no, well, you know, well, we don't usually. We think about it first. So if somebody comes to a Chinese citizen and says, we're the government, you have to do this, then they're very likely to be doing it. And we've seen a lot of scams where Chinese students have paid £10,000-20,000 because, oh, you've got this problem with your visa, and unless you pay it, we'll cancel your student visa. And they've paid over all this money, and it's been a scam. And we've seen a lot of that. But it's the Chinese OCGs themselves who will mainly target them. Doesn't mean they're not vulnerable to other OCGs, but not any more than anybody else. Hi, Naomi, you've got your hand up as well.
Do you want to come back in? Yeah.
Yeah, hi. In terms of that, so I mean, I think scams is probably the biggest thing that we did see, but I think second to that is just the inability to be able to know exactly how to get the support. But for the scams, yeah, absolutely. I think as soon as I think as soon as things are sent to them that are official. So, for example, links to websites or links to properties, links to Airbnb properties, that kind of thing that kind of lead into those scams. Instantly, they feel that a payment can be made. It gets worse by the fact that Western Union transfers are actual valid payments for university fees, but then we always say in the private sector, not valid. So, you know, it's a bit of a tricky kind of, you know, kind of advice stage there. You know, what kind of advice do you give? Do you do it in Chinese? Do you try and go through the agents? We always find that a bit hard. But yeah, interested to know what you would kind of say in terms of advice around all of that, really.
I would say just need someone at the university whose advice they can trust and who they're willing to talk to. So just be that person. If you've got to worry about, you've been asked about this at the British government, has sent you this and you've got to pay £10,000.
Yeah.
Have somebody who I can lean on a support mechanism to ask. Because if they ask people on their WeChat group, then it's likely to be somebody who's scamming them anyway.
Yeah, that's it.
I think yeah.
Often we get contacted when it's too late, so they've already paid the payment. And I suppose, you know, a lot of the times they've sent through hardship funds and that kind of thing, so they've gone through the university hardship fund in order to try and, you know, kind of re-establish their kind of funding for the year, but just not really kind of, yeah, it is a really big, it's very complex, and I think it's so outside of our kind of knowledge.
So what we've got at Birmingham now is one of the Chinese student leaders has said to us, why don't you do a focus group? We'll invite some people who want to talk to you, you know, and invite a focus group, and you might even get some individual interviews off that, but people will talk to you in person. So if we do the survey to capture the big data, and then we can get the more qualitative data in terms of surveys and individual interviews, but having those focus groups, I think, is really important. I mean, you may already have them.
That's a great shout. Yeah, it's a really good idea. I know that engagement with those is often quite hard, but I think it's a really good idea. And I think certainly with private sector pressures, it's going to become something that's more and more of an issue. So I think it's something we need to get onto.
I think there are trust issues. So it's one of those things. If we're saying we're going to do something for them, then we need to do it and deliver on our promises. And when we do that, and you see this in all communities. You know, I've been a community police officer for many years before I went into intelligence. And if you delivered on your promises, then people would come to you. People would trust you and come to you. And it's really no different.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. It's really helpful.
Pleasure.
Thank you. Aaron, I see you've got your hand up.
Yeah, this way. Hiya. We don't recruit very much from China at all, but we recruit. We have a huge international student population, mainly from Nigeria and India. It's the Nigerian students. We've all seen those emails from Nigeria, where emails you ask for £100,000 and things like that. Yeah, but this year particularly, I've noticed a lot of Nigerian students being scammed by people they know back home. Yeah, I just wondered if there's other where we can get that knowledge as universities for other countries as well, not just China. Yeah.
Yeah, you know, again, you've proved a point. The Nigerian students are being scammed by organised crime groups of their own ethnicity. You know, and that's the way it generally seems to work. But I think what has been asked for the Home Office, they've said, you know, if we make a success of this study, then they're going to want to borrow it and send it out to universities in regard to other ethnicities. So if you make a success of this, then you're likely to see that.
Right.
Okay, I can see we're coming close to the top of the hour, and I've got a couple of comments that I just wanted to make. So for those of us that are struggling to get our senior leadership teams to listen to this, and there'll be reasons behind that will be political and no doubt to do with recruitment. One of the things that I might mention is and Dave highlighted it as a key point, was around the academic misconduct and the essay mills. That's when senior leadership teams at universities will start listening, when there's academic misconduct in place. Essay mills are obviously a huge issue in the United Kingdom, and I know across the rest of the world as well. So that might be something that we can use as leverage to get them to listen to the other vulnerabilities from a welfare point of view that we are dealing with at the more coalface level, if that makes sense. So that might be something to highlight. I was really interested in the sort of the thing that Dave said around the social credit, and how students are almost blackmailed in you know, saying that your parents' social credit will be affected by this. And of course we all know that China has that social credit system, and you know, it's quite a closed society. We don't hear too much about it, but imagine being threatened with your parents having no heating would be a very quick way for you to get money across to somebody. So I think those were some standout points for me. Just a couple of anecdotes as well for me. Very recently, in fact yesterday, I was contacted by JLL, who are Jones Lang LaSalle, a really big property developer based across the UK, but have some big properties that they manage in Manchester, big tall apartment blocks in the city centre. And one of their senior managers contacted us to let us know that many of their Chinese students had fallen victim as had JLL, fallen victim to a rent-to-rent scam. So we don't know whether or not it was organised criminal activity, of course, but somebody in China has been approaching JLL and renting properties, signing tenancies, paying market rent to JLL, and then releasing those properties out to Chinese students at, you know, a much inflated rental increase. And there is no valid tenancy agreement in place because they're not contracting with the owners of the building. JLL have uncovered this over a number of weeks and was sort of reaching out to us in terms of, you know, what can we do? And of course, once the issue has passed, as we may be aware, there's very little we can do. So I've passed it on to the Economic Crime Unit within Greater Manchester Police. We've also advised to report to Action Fraud, which those of us that are UK based on the call will know is a reasonably useless tool, to be honest, that doesn't often prosecute, but it's the only place that people can go and report that, because it's not seen.
Cooper, I've got a meeting with them on Monday following your introduction.
Good. That's JLL, not Action Fraud.
Yeah, Action Fraud.
So that you know, that's a rent-to-rent scam that's happening now. It's live. It's in Manchester. I was made aware of it only yesterday, and I've also, as Dave said, I've passed that detail on to him as well in light of his work. So hopefully we'll get something out of that. And then the other example that we had was somebody walked into my reception team yesterday in Manchester. It was a father of a Chinese student who was incensed, raged, etc., because his daughter had been scammed out of £20,000 via a dating website. Now, we don't know many further details. We've taken it as a case. My housing caseworker, Aisha, who is on the call today, will be investigating that and advising that student where we can. but I think suffice to say that's £20,000 gone and gone. And the father was really, you know, he's reported it to there's Aisha, he's reported it to the British consulate, the Chinese consulate, and he'd access to the university building, the student union building, in fact, to sort of say, where else can I report this? I want to report this criminal activity. My daughter's been defrauded out of 20k, help. Okay, so there was 2 live issues that are happening right here, right now in Manchester. I also just wanted to highlight that Dave's survey, so he is currently in the process of surveying Chinese students. It is an anonymous survey, and I do want to just highlight that for any colleagues that are on the call that are interested in perhaps bringing that through to their institutions and sending that survey out, particularly from the United States. I know we've got a lot from the UK. Dave will definitely want more.
In terms of that, Cooper, I can while I won't make another country part of the same survey, I can literally replicate it, put another name on it, and send it out. So you know that it won't mix up the results. We can still have results that are specific to each country, but it'll be basically the same survey.
Yeah. So if anyone's interested in that from the United States, please drop Dave a line. Dave we'll send around Dave's contact details, and that will be brilliant. And for universities and institutions that do partake in that survey, the data will be shared with those institutions. So again, a good chunk of data to perhaps then take forward within the institution. You know, institutions respond to data, don't they? So if we can get a good chunk of data across to them, then perhaps they'll resource more welfare around this. And then finally,
you know, sorry, go on, Cooper.
It's
around evidence, isn't it? You know, it's very difficult, and we've seen this when we've managed to get these jobs put through in a policing context. No one's interested until you can evidence the vulnerability and the harm.
Yeah.
No one's interested in anecdotes or turning over a stone until you can prove that the risk is there, and if they don't turn it over, they're going to be liable. And at that point, people become interested. So that's really what the survey's about.
Yeah, good point. Liability always focuses the attention of institutions, in my opinion, and that data backup would be really useful. So please do think about participating in that. And then finally, I just wanted to let anyone who's American still on the call know that Dave is a Raiders fan. So there you go. I have no idea what that means. That's like me saying Manchester United, yay. But Dave supports the Raiders. Dave.
I do. I've just had delivered a massive picture of Al Davis for my study, a big 6 foot by 4 foot picture. Who's the Raiders owner, by the way? He was the coach, then the owner, and the league commissioner and everything.
Okay, brilliant. It honestly means nothing to me, but I hope that was fun for some of you. All right, and that I think is the end of the presentation officially. Beth, did you have any ITGA announcements, or are we excused?
Well, we've certainly met our time. Thank you so much, David. This has been an excellent presentation, and I think our level of awareness is much higher. I have to process this for a while to really understand the impact that it has globally. If anybody has any comments and you'd like to email myself, beth@itga.org. If we want to continue this conversation and have more conversation with Dave about this. Dave, thank you so much for your time today. Cooper, thank you, and everyone that joined us.
My pleasure.
And
thank you very
hope
much.
to see you at Fort Collins, Colorado. Y'all come see us at the conference.
Yes, indeed. Have a great evening. Good afternoon,
Bye.
everybody. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.